And as soon as you try to do something a little different, you run into all these challenges, right? If you could fix a problem within a function or division, it's probably already fixed because we find leaders who can do that. That's what they get rewarded for, and that's who we select. So business units run pretty good most of the time. Where the challenges exist is those overlaps. And sustainable business space is one of those activities that tends to find a lot of that. Because as Amory Lovins once said, to optimize part of the system is to pessimize the whole system. And he was right so often, at least in my experience. Let me throw a great example. It sounded simple. We thought that it would be a great idea to test and roll out electric delivery vehicles at Iron Mountain because they were, well, it was de rigueur for a moment there to sign up to the EV 100 and commit to electrifying the fleet. But under the sex appeal of all that was some real driving business functions. EVs are cheaper to own and operate. Past the initial price point of early adopters, the actual operating costs are substantially lower than diesel vehicles. But beyond that, we saw that in tests, they were more fun to drive. They were quiet, no smoke. There was just a whole bunch of really good reasons why they offered a future for our fleet operations, and we were operating tens of thousands of vehicles around the world. However, there was some catches. So, for example, the fleet operations team thought that switching to electric, or okay, they're smart people, but at the same time, there was a little bit of self-interest there. Not buying diesel fuel was a really good deal. And so it kind of looked like free fuel to the fleet operations team. I mean, just plug it in. Meanwhile, over in the operations or the facilities management team, who had responsibility for the utilities line item, plugging in tens of megawatts of extra load actually made quite a bit of difference in the electric bill for a typical building. In fact, the fleet electrification could be bigger electric load than the rest of the building. And faced with things like Liam was talking about, such as time of day metering and multi-tier utility rates, you could do that wrong in such a way that you could really create significant cost exposure on the facilities side. Well, so naturally, the facilities folks were not so warm. Not only were they worried about digging up the parking lot and figuring out how to put wires in and charging stations in, they were looking at the expenses of that. And you had this interesting juxtaposition of overall the corporation was going to save a ton of money because it was a lot more efficient and a lot less expensive to charge vehicles correctly than to buy diesel. But the alignment of the individual functional leaders wasn't quite in the right place to make this an obvious win. Go on beyond that, and all of a sudden the energy management team gets involved and starts going, wait a minute, that changes the scale and scope of the potential for putting solar on that building or adding battery support to the building. So all of a sudden it becomes a multifunctional algorithm to come up with how do you make this a win for everybody in the business. And I think it's a great example, Eric, exactly what you're talking about. All these individual organizations were optimized to do their job really well, the way it had always been. But this new wrinkle of electrification really changed the landscape.
It's the changing nature of the scale, the speed, the impact area of things that may on the surface sound relatively simple to do or to enact. And we're finding that this leakage, goes into other areas with other people who are incentivized differently within the organization, et cetera. So it requires a different way to think about things and different tools to help get there. Liam, with AI and other technologies arriving on top of all of this speed of change, what kinds of things are you seeing, and what are the ways that we can apply some of these tools to help us deal with the pace of change that we're seeing?
Well, when I got into the energy business like 20 years ago, a typical energy efficiency project in a commercial industrial client was, hey, let's replace the light bulbs. And it was that was a pretty simple deal to do. You didn't have to pull in that many stakeholders. The ROI pointed towards it being a good idea. Let's get on with it. Now we've got so many stakeholders that you've got to traverse both horizontally in the organization and vertically. And it does create a lot of complexity. Something that I've been doing recently is using AI in another way to suck in a huge amount of context about the organization, everything from its corporate statements on sustainability through to its website, corporate website, through to field data that we're sucking out of meters in the field, settlement documentation, PPA, legal agreements, you name it, and sucking it in there, along with, guess what, the organizational structure of the organization, who reports to whom. And often I find that the more you put in context with an AI, and you put your problems to it and ask its advice, it can be surprisingly incisive at times. So uh, this is one of the uses of AI that I found to actually put, say, our communications, internal communications problems to the AI and say, look, here's the opportunity that we have on the table here with deploying this new technology. It's going to present this kind of problem, this kind of problem, and this kind of problem. We are moving from, just to go back to Kevin's example with EVs, we're moving from this being, that this is a good problem for the P&L, but a bad problem for the balance sheet. How do we deal with this? How do we communicate with the various parties? And our results so far have been pretty remarkable on this, and it really kind of helps us avoid procrastination, and it allows us to focus on, hey, we've got a very, very interesting proposition here. Here's how we communicate it best. Here's a communications plan. Let's just go and get dug into this.